Fox, CNN. It's my little
I, s-
setup.
I
And I was
suppose if
just
it works
asleep.
for them, it'll work for us too.
Meet the Pressers with Matt Mallory and Clint Necro. Brought to you by Public Safety and Education and the Trigger Pressers Union.
Meet the Pressers is brought to you by Mantis X. Mantis X helps shooters suck less. Next Level Training. Makers of CERT training products. Saber Red. Saber Red has been making men and women cry since 1975. Meet the Pressers is also brought to you by these fine companies, shows, and organizations. Thank you.
Welcome, everybody, to Meet the Pressers. My name is Clint Macro, and this is my esteemed colleague, Matthew Mallory. Meet the Pressers is a safe place for trigger pressers to congregate and talk about guns, gear, gadgets, political activism, training, religion, you name it. If it's all about self-sufficiency, we're all for it. Today, we have a very special guest, someone that is serving in our government as a legislator. And Matt, would you do the honor of making the formal introduction?
Absolutely. So my local congressman, Congressman Brandon Williams, I'm a huge supporter of my company and everything that I do. We've been working on trying to get him on here for a while. Schedules are crazy across the board. So I love having you on and talking about everything that's going on and doing what we can to help you stay in the seat you're in because you are our best advocate here, especially in this district, this area in upstate New York. So thank you for coming on, sir.
You bet. Matt and Clint, great to be with you guys.
Absolutely.
Glad to have you on.
So let's start out with I think prior to starting to record and stuff, we were talking a little bit about reaching out to your elected officials and trying to get involved and whatnot. What do you like to see from your constituents to let you know when you're doing your job the way that they want, as well as the best way to reach out to actually get you to respond to their requests and their needs? What's that communication? What's the best way?
Yeah, Matt, you and I live in a state that has maybe the most restrictive gun laws anywhere in the country. And I often feel like as gun owners, that we're actually targeted, not just, that the laws are tough, but the laws are written in a way to make life particularly difficult for people that are more likely to own guns, hunters, concealed carry, just home defense. I mean, just common sense gun owners. And the reason that the New York State laws are like that is because, frankly, gun owners don't vote.
Mm.
So 3 years ago, I didn't know a single person in politics. I had never run for any office before. I hardly knew anyone. In fact, I really didn't know anyone in the Republican committees in my area. I didn't know any elected officials. And I was just frustrated, I think, like a lot of people are. And I decided to run for an open seat in Congress. Maybe you think I've lost my mind. So that's one way you can get involved, just run for Congress. But what I've learned, just going from literally citizen to sitting on the floor of the House of Representatives in one step, and is that listening to the to voters, and I'm using that term deliberately, is something that's really been important for me. And so, when I go to speak at rod and gun clubs or, I talk to law enforcement professionals, they're going to talk to me about 2A issues. And I need to know that that's what they care about and where the lines are drawn for them. And, that's particularly important in states like New York. So, you just gotta let your voice be heard and known. We say it all the time. If every gun owner in New York State voted, the legislature and the laws would look very different.
Yep.
Mhm.
And it's very hard to get that message out, but I think it's becoming more and more clear.
Yeah, I think that would move the needle in pretty much across the country, I would say.
for sure.
I've often expressed to folks that it's good to be in contact no matter what. Certainly, sending an email, ultimately, somebody in your office is going to be able to get eyes on that. A phone call might actually be a little bit better, and sending a good old stamped envelope is a better way too. Is it true if I sent you a letter that was registered mail, like return receipt, would that get your attention much more readily than, say, for instance, an email or a phone call?
Well, there's 780,000 people in a congressional district.
Wow.
That's the population in each congressional district. So you can imagine, we get a lot of calls, but we have very sophisticated. First of all, we have a team of people that answers the phones all the time and answers all the mail and email.
Mm.
Um, my personal opinion is that calling and talking to someone, even if you're reading from a script of exactly what it is that's important to you, it will get recorded into a system. I don't mean recorded like they're listening to everything that you're saying, but it'll get typed into a system about what your issue is, who you are. You have to be from that area. So you have to be a constituent in my district, for example, and it gets logged and recorded, and we'll get a response. But that goes to my team to make sure that we understand, where people are and what they're calling about. And if we see things change, we're very, very attuned to that. I mean, it's literally day by day. Hey, we got 12 calls on this issue, or the phones were ringing off the hook on this issue, and I guarantee you that it gets elected officials' attention, because what they want is to be reelected.
Yeah.
And if they know that they've crossed a line, or they're not speaking up or standing up for things that are important to a large and very active part of their community and their constituency, they're going to notice and they're going to start making changes.
You know, this is why I like you, because you spoke like in the third person there as far as politicians, and yet you are a politician. So this just
Don't
this
remind me.
yeah, this just shows that you're in a position, but you're still humble enough to realize that, that yes, votes, you need the votes, but you also don't want to compromise your morals, your ethics and stuff like that. So that's why, we need more good people like you in politics. And we also need to make sure that we're reelecting good people like you in politics, so that there's a sounding board, at least a reasonable person in those positions. Because as we can see, there's a lot of them that aren't reasonable across the country. And we'll obviously get into stuff like that with guns and whatnot in a little bit. But thank you.
Your explanation actually spiked something in my head that I want to ask you about, if I could. You had mentioned, and I understand this. You had mentioned that to really move a needle, you need to call the person that represents you. So it's, you taking a call from me, who's in Pennsylvania, who's not your constituent, would likely not get recorded. But what would be the best way for a citizen to get a hold of someone who's like a committee member or a chair of a committee? Or, like a number of years ago, we were on another show, and it was pretty much came down to Joe Manchin's vote on whether or not something was going to pass. And I went ahead and called his office. Now, I didn't reach anyone, so I left a voicemail. But I said, I'm not your constituent, but your vote actually, it's going to affect my life. So what's the best way for folks that aren't constituents that might want to contact an elected official, you or another one that might be on a particular committee, to where that could get recorded and really help to move the needle in a direction that's positive?
Good.
Sure. In an instance like that, when you're trying to reach, like you said, chairman of a committee, one of the best ways is to use advocacy groups that speak for, a group of people. The NRA, for example, they are good at focusing their attention.
Crafting the right message.
Senator Manchin is going to take a meeting with the NRA. That's an important group. And, or Gun Owners of America. It is the advocacy groups. Another way is to try to get, on a committee hearing. And, a lot of times the committee is looking for experts in a field. If it's law enforcement, or Matt, like what you do of training law enforcement, that can speak with some credibility on what the real issue is. And if you know people that are in those positions that can be those expert witnesses in a committee hearing, that also can be very powerful because that gets picked up in the news cycle. Those messages and statements that they make are very finely curated so that they are able to deliver impact. And a typical committee hearing, it depends on who is in the governing majority. Right
Mhm.
now, the Republicans control the House of Representatives. So that's why you're seeing these investigations that Jim Jordan's doing
Yeah.
or Jamie Comer. Those would not happen if we were not in the majority. And if there's a committee hearing, three of the four witnesses in a committee are going to be aligned with uh, Chairman Jordan or Chairman Comer's priorities. And if you can be one of those, you guys are both qualified to be that kind of subject matter expert. Um, and then just making sure that you're getting your message out because uh, it's not just about answering the committee's chair. It's really about appearing before America
Right.
Mm.
and presenting what a common sense gun owner looks like and sounds like, and what the arguments are like, and what that mindset is. Because I can guarantee you that the other side, they have their advocates.
Mm.
And they are extremely well prepared. They're very well organized. They are calling, they are getting on those committee hearings. They are getting their advocacy groups um, in front of those chairmen or offices or committee staff. And that's another thing I would suggest is that being able to provide expert testimony or witness or reports to the committee staff because they're doing a lot of research into these issues. And if you know somebody or you have that certain expertise or you have that story, a lot of times it's about stories,
Yeah.
about defending your home against an attacker, that kind of stuff. Those are very powerful. So anyway, I hope you can pick something good out of that.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's great.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I remember meeting, I went down to Albany. I met with seven different political offices just before COVID. It was actually, it was probably just after maybe 2015 or 16. So it was a little before COVID. And I remember sitting with State Senator Parker's law aide or something to that extent, maybe a secretary. And she had said that after I pitched some of the laws that they were trying to put in effect, I was like, no, this is why that's not going to work. This is going to work that way. And she came back and said, well, we'll have to run this through the Gifford Foundation. And that was my first clue in my head that those are those agencies or those organizations you're talking about there that, that they're bouncing stuff off of outside of, them, another organization outside the political bounds that they're literally looking at for knowledge and experience and direction, which was scary to me at that point. So,
Well, squeaky wheel gets the grease,
yeah,
right? So,
very true.
it always kind of overwhelms me to learn what an elected official has to become an expert on.
Mm.
You got to become expert on childcare, on healthcare, on drilling, on the environment, on
Mhm.
guns, on like pick a topic and you have to become, have some level of expertise. Obviously, you're going to consult with that kind of stuff. And if the gun people aren't there saying, "Hey, I'm over here, ask me questions," and it's the anti-gun people that say, "Hey, I'm over here, ask me questions," where are they going to go? And as we know, just as a citizenry, we are much less well regulated when it comes to knowing about firearms and about safety. And just frankly, you could say there's a much less knowledge on just common sense in general, let alone when it applies to firearms. So, uh, yeah, I believe that the anti-gun groups certainly are more funded and better organized for a host of reasons. But when they do give their message, a lot of times gun owners will be logical, methodical, and very cut and dry numbers, but it's the anti-gun people that bring that story
Mm.
and play that emotion. And emotion is where it's at if you're going to sway other people to do them what you want them to do.
Mm.
Because the emotion is what's going to persuade other voters,
Mm-hmm.
right? You may think that you're going to show up to your legislator with a common sense, well-structured, articulated argument, but in the back of their mind, and I hate to say this, but most people in politics are thinking about three things. Did I get on TV?
Mm.
Did I raise money? Did I get reelected?
Mm-hmm.
And I hate to be cynical like that, but I have been there long enough and observed closely that I see a lot of this kind of behavior. And so if you are going to go try to advocate to that person, to that representative or their team, just remember they're concerned. That's what they're concerned about. They don't want to get on TV for the wrong thing,
Right.
and they're looking for opportunities to get on TV for the right thing. And they don't want to alienate a group. Now, this is one of the things that's happening. Gun ownership is becoming much more pervasive across a lot of different socioeconomic, um, uh, different kinds of people, racial lines. It's becoming much more common to be a gun owner. And so the demographics are changing significantly for gun ownership. And you might find common cause for common sense gun laws in places that you wouldn't have found it before. Areas that have defunded the police, for example, are facing a lot of crime.
Yeah.
And the responsible citizens that have families that want to look out for their business or their home, are turning to their own gun ownership, and they could be powerful allies, even if you don't agree with them on other things or your entire agenda. So I think it's good to, remember those stories, like you said.
And we've seen upticks in our classes at least. I know here in New York, and I know Clint and I have talked about it in the past, as far as people that never thought they'd touch a gun, or
Yeah.
they're Democratic voters and such like that. So it's definitely a shift since COVID, since the riots and stuff of 2020 at least. You bring up a good point earlier that made me think of, what are your thoughts? And we weren't going to talk about this, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on it. But what are your guys' thoughts? I know, Clint, we've talked about it a little in the past, as far as term limits.
Yeah, term limit is very interesting. I've signed the term limit pledge. People that are camped out in politics for their entire political career is not what our founding fathers, envisioned. And you were supposed to be a citizen, like frankly, like I was,
Mhm.
and I'm also a military veteran,
Yep.
and go serve, and then come back to your community and pick up, the plow or the hammer, the trade or whatever it was. It really wasn't intended to have career politicians, and that's where we've gotten. Here's the trick, and everyone needs to understand this: is that if term limits are short, you're going to have a different problem. You're going to have the bureaucracy that is going to have the ability to just wait out, um, a new member of Congress. Somebody gets there,
Mm,
it's certainly been a steep learning curve. I've learned a lot in 2 years. Uh, it takes a while to get into a position of influence within, like you mentioned, like a chairmanship.
parties and stuff.
Um, and by the time you really figure out how to be effective, you could be term limited. And the bureaucracy knows this, and they are more than happy to wait you out because they're there for 30, 40, or
Yeah.
more years. And we can't turn over more power to the bureaucracy. So term limits is a two-edged sword.
Right.
I don't know what the magic number is, but in general, I'm in favor of term limits.
Well, I've gone back and forth with this in my adult life. I've met some people who have been in office for many, many years that have really done some amazing, great things and are truly in it for the
True.
altruistic goal of helping our citizenry enjoy the life, liberty, and property that they've so worked so hard for. Um, I think really and honestly, though, if people were more civic minded and did their civic duty, every time we go to the polls, there's your opportunity to impose
To
term
term
limits.
limits. That's a good point.
So if people paid attention to what the elected officials are doing, stayed in contact with them, and then if they weren't doing what they wanted to do, voted them out, I think that's truly the founders' ultimate reason for,
Yeah,
the
litmus
government comes
test.
from the citizens, so we truly have that opportunity, but only if we exercise it.
Right.
And you'll have situations like I can say in Pennsylvania where there was a governor with a certain name and his son ran for office and he won because the people recognize the name and he continues to do a reasonably crappy job at what he does, but they vote him in because that name is comfortable. That's
Mm.
someone that they know that they can just hit the button for because it's someone they've heard. They have that name recognition. How many people are looking at his voting record, have spoken to him, have seen what he's all about as an individual? Probably not, but they know the name. So they click it. Like if I ran for office, I would change my name to Ronald Reagan, and I bet I'd get elected.
So let's shift gears here and talk about the border. What What do you see on that? Because I see so much on social media. One way it's like, oh, the border's the way it was when, Trump was. It's been that way forever. And then I have friends in ICE and stuff and Border Patrol, and they're like, no, it's a disaster down there with them trying to deal with everything and them just basically not having enough staff to be able to see who's coming in, good or bad. So what's your take from the front lines? Because I know you're deep in the trenches there, knowing what's going on. So from the governmental side of it, what's your take on the border and how's it affecting the country?
Well, even Democrats now recognize and are quietly acknowledging that it's a total disaster.
Mhm.
I have been to the border. I have seen the streams of humanity coming across. Um, just in my own personal experience, 9 o'clock at night, the hundreds and hundreds of people that I saw coming across at Eagle Pass. Um, I was with Border Patrol agents. We stopped a group of young men, all under 30, and asked them where they were from. Venezuela, 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 one after the other. I asked them what they did before they came. Army, Army, construction, Army, Army, construction.
Wow.
And I thought, oh my gosh.
We're being invaded.
And they're not they're not hiding it.
No.
This wasn't coercive. They know more about our immigration or lack thereof system than we do.
Mhm.
They knew where to cross. They're being led by the cartels. The cartels funnel everyone to one place in such numbers because they control everybody that crosses that it takes all of the border patrol resources there just to process them, right? Not to stop them, just to have them sit down, get into a bus, go to the processing centers, separating women and children from the men, and giving them new clothes and giving them a health check. It takes so many people to do that that it pulls the border agents
From
um,
other areas.
from every areas. So, and they do this intentionally because that's really what they want is they want to open up those places where they get the really bad people to come across. And so they flood the zone. It's like football. You flood the zone hoping that you can sneak a receiver off to the other side. And
Wow.
this is what they do all day, every day. And this is where you get, literally hundreds of thousands or millions of people crossing that we don't know, that we don't encounter, that we don't document.
How is that not willful ignorance or treasonous? I mean, we got 20 over 20, what's the number now? 20 million? Over 20 million that have come over
Yeah,
the border?
15, 16, maybe 20. It's,
Too many.
there's
Period.
700 members. These are tragic numbers. There's 700 known terrorists, known on the terrorist watch list that have come across, have been intercepted, processed, and released because they're literally 700. And now we don't know where they are.
Of
There's
course not.
been 300,000 unaccompanied minors. Okay. 300,000. Virtually every one of those is being sex trafficked. It is, it's a human tragedy. It's unspeakable. And those people are being met by the cartel on our side and they're being taken. They think they've been promised that they're going to get a hotel job and send money home in Los Angeles, and they disappear into the sex trade and are never seen again. Until their body shows up somewhere because they've lost whatever usefulness or overdosed or whatever it is, and there's no way to track them. We have no idea who they are, and they literally were brought across and in the hands of our border patrol and were processed and then released back to picked up by the cartels and taken away. 300,000
So
children.
that's sickening.
It's
So
sickening.
what's your What's your thoughts on the fix of this? Because obviously the administration's not doing anything to stop it. Biden got rid of all the Trump's orders, executive orders to keep the border closed. It got rid of them and then tries to put it back on Republicans, saying that you wouldn't vote for the bill so he could sign it into law, which is just a political game because he could have just reenacted the executive orders Trump had in place. But obviously that's admitting defeat, and he doesn't want to do that. So he's putting it on the Republicans, trying to make it a political thing. So what can we and us laymen do to help fix this issue, short of going to the border and standing there, keeping people from coming in?
Well, you've got to make a decision at the ballot box. This has been a deliberate strategy on behalf of Joe Biden and the Democrats. They did it loudly and proudly the very first days of the Biden administration, repealing, as you said, Trump's border policies, particularly remain in Mexico is the most important one. It's not the only one, but it's the most important. The House passed a strong border bill called HR 2. It passed the House of Representatives. It went to the Senate, and it's gathering dust on Chuck Schumer's desk. They discussed a bill. They called it bipartisan in the Senate. They discussed a Senate bill, but Chuck Schumer didn't even have enough Democratic votes to pass it through the Senate. Didn't have enough bipartisan votes to pass it through the Senate. And so they made a big to-do about it. And then they claimed that I guess that Donald Trump killed it or the House Republicans killed it, even though it never passed the Senate. It never got sent to the House. We never voted on it. It
Political
is the
shell
most
game.
insincere. It is the most insincere and flimsy argument. And yet, unfortunately, an uninformed public maybe doesn't understand it. And a mainstream media is simply not reporting the truth, and it's shameful.
It's a boondoggle, and it shows the complete disdain and disrespect for the law-abiding citizens of this country, the way they're approaching the border. How is this good for our country to allow that many people across? And I've never been able to get a good answer from that. I'll get talking points, but no one will tell me really, well, how does this benefit our country to allow this many people come into this country?
You know, what I see over and over again by the far left, the progressive left, is that they use our good values against us. So one of the greatest things about America is that we are a nation of immigrants, and that we attract immigrants, that we need and want immigration into this country. And it is our past, it's our present, it's our future. And so they take this good quality that we have as Americans, things that we believe in, and then they drive a incredibly destructive policy through it. In this case, opening up the floodgates, and in fact, in many cases, flying illegal immigrants into our country. It's hard to understand what their actual strategy is because it is so outrageous. But they can get by with it because they rely on the good nature of Americans to not turn away people in need, to not turn away immigrants because it's our heritage. It's pretty clear that they're packing them into and sending them into swing states like Pennsylvania. I don't have hard evidence, but certainly appears to be trying to change the dynamics and demographics of those areas and who can vote. It's they're catering. This is so upside down. They seem to be catering to large employers that are looking for cheap labor, which really undermines working class Americans that have their wages suppressed because there is so much illegal labor available suddenly. And so for working families and for working class Americans, they're now competing against people that are getting, by the way, maybe free healthcare is or free housing and are getting all this public assistance. And it's just not fair on so many levels. And it is beyond me. I think it's backfiring on the Democrats in a very significant way. I think most Americans have woken up to the scale and scope of of this illegal activity, and there's a lot of blowback. You see Kamala Harris trying to show she's tough on the border instead of being the failed border czar. It's
She,
absolutely crazy.
she finally went there, right? Right, went to the border. She hadn't been to France, was it? But or the
No, it
border?
was Taco Bell. Oh, no, wait.
Yeah,
That's not
that's
where
right.
she went. Taco Bell. Go to the border. Was that their?
Yeah, that's
Right
their
on the
slogan, right?
border.
South of the
Yeah.
border. Wait.
Yeah.
So you had said flood, which makes me think of North Carolina and Florida. And can you give a little bit of insight on what the federal government is doing to help American citizens in Florida and North Carolina? Because we know for a fact they're giving thousands upon thousands of dollars, and then California is giving what, $150,000 with no credit or anything for illegals over there to get a home. So what help is the federal government doing for North Carolina and Florida residents because of the flooding? And because we're hearing mixed things on the internet about that. Anything to mention about that?
Yeah, sure. And I'll be very straightforward because we just went through this in my district. We had an EF4 scale tornado rip through Rome, New York. And that is very unusual for our part of the country. And I was on site within an hour of the tornado touching down. Uh, on our way over to the tornado site, I had my office call FEMA and to tell them to be on alert that this was certainly going to be of a scale that's going to require FEMA response. And so we immediately started working on that. The way FEMA works is that it can help coordinate some federal relief activities on the front end, but most of the relief activities are going to be handled by the local municipalities if they're still functional, and particularly the state. And the federal government should be mobilizing things, like the military, for example, and to provide that immediate kind of support and to channel any kind of federal resources. That's what FEMA is supposed to do. Otherwise, it really is up to the states and the local governments to do that. And the most important thing is that there's a declaration of an emergency that actually unlocks the federal government resources and its ability to respond. And so that's why you see, Governor DeSantis or even Governor Hochul in New York, very quickly move to make it an emergency zone, declaration and a disaster zone, and so that they can unlock and activate those federal resources. The way that it works is that FEMA is sort of like, think of it as like the insurance of last resort, or the insurance on top of existing insurance. And during the cleanup, municipalities or state governments are supposed to keep track, and homeowners, by the way, and business owners keep track of all of the costs related to the cleanup.
Hmm.
And then sometimes weeks, maybe months, sometimes they drag their feet. I mean, it could be years, but sometime
That
later
sounds like insurance.
Yeah.
they will get
And
they
the
will get
government.
reimbursed for those costs, and there's certain caps on it, et cetera, et cetera. That's the role of FEMA. And from what I've seen, particularly in Western North Carolina, the Biden administration was inexcusably slow in activating the military. You have Fort Liberty there. What is it, the 101st Airborne, or maybe it's the 82nd, but anyway, whoever is there, immense resources and capabilities there in North Carolina,
Mhm.
and they're not. They trickled those out. When there are Americans still dying
Yeah.
and cut off and isolated and hiking 5 miles to get insulin for their child. And it was really pathetic what the federal response was. And but the real battle for the resources for FEMA will come once the tallies are totaled and the costs are known and the actual expenses are known, and that's really where FEMA comes in.
Well, to my understanding, North Carolina, the governor made that call, asked for that help very, very early on. I know back years ago, I was perhaps a little unfair to George Bush during Katrina. I didn't really understand how that kind of worked, but with North Carolina, they asked for that help. And as you said, they waited so long when perhaps at least helicopters could be out looking for people and helping. I mean, Fort Campbell's not very far from there either.
Right.
Yeah, so
So where's that being said then, where's all the resources coming from for all the illegals that are coming over the border? Because I mean, we're hearing that they're getting, they walk across the border and you alluded to it earlier, they're getting new clothing, they're getting, debit cards, they're getting a cell phone. I mean, where's all that? I mean, obviously it's coming from us taxpayers, but which organization is that being funneled through? Because based on what you just said, it doesn't sound like that's FEMA, or is that FEMA?
Well, it appears that some of it actually has been FEMA, redirected FEMA fundings. I think, kind of quietly and not out in the open. They're paying a lot of NGOs to bus illegal migrants from the border to anywhere that they want to go. You can get a bus ticket, from the border anywhere you want to go, any major city, particularly sanctuary cities.
Yeah.
And so it's quite a good business, which is funny that the federal government actually is in the human trafficking business.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's
it's
exactly
shameful on so many levels, and they're targeting these sanctuary cities. And now you see Governor Hochul
New
in
York City
New
mayor.
York State
Hmm.
and the New York City mayor, are allocating billions and billions of New York State taxpayer dollars,
Yep.
to support illegal immigrants. And I have to tell you, that doesn't fly in central New York, where Matt and I live, because it's not a wealthy part of the country. Everybody works hard where we live, and they're not getting free stuff from the government. And yet they see their tax dollars going to support this. That's actually what people are upset about, at least where we live.
For sure. And I guess that could tailor into dovetail into the next thing is the economy. I mean, I think the two, personally for me, Iraq could be running for president. Iraq could be running for your position, which you're definitely not Iraq. You're way better than that. But anybody could be running for the position. And if they're not saying this economy sucks, we know the economy can be improved and the borders need to be locked down. I don't see how any American can say the economy's good and the borders are fine, and they're living under a rock, if if you will. So,
Yeah,
economy. Oh,
well, the high prices is what's hurting everyone,
Mhm.
sure.
and it's in every part of our life. And it is, obviously it's the grocery store, milk and eggs and the basics. It's the gas pump. Every time you fill up your car, I mean, I have my own staff are complaining about it, and eyes are on it. And but it's also in our energy costs.
Yeah.
New York State has made really bad decisions in the kind and where we get our electricity, and canceling pipelines. Governor Cuomo very famously canceled gas pipelines that would provide ways to heat our home and to provide electricity as well. And they've gone in on the on the Green New Deal. Now, I am the only nuclear engineer in Congress, and I have thousands of hours, excuse me, thousands of hours supervising the operation of nuclear power plants as a submarine officer in the Navy. And I can just tell you, I understand energy quite well, and New York State has made terrible, terrible decisions. And we're all paying the price. You see, National Grid is asking for a record rate increase, and it's certainly going to get approved and passed along to consumers.
Yep.
And the, elections have consequences,
For sure.
policies have consequences, and working families are the ones that are being hurt the most. 63% or so of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. They're the ones that are falling farther and farther behind. And it's just not fair. It is absolutely not right. And, as someone that I think has more than a passing understanding of the economy, that I'm extremely frustrated and I'm outspoken on these issues.
For sure. Yeah, I think to bring it all together, got to vote for people. You got to get out and vote. You got to vote for good politicians like Brandon Williams and and Trump at the national level to make sure that we get people in place that realize there is a border problem, there is an economy issue that need to be fixed and rectified. And other than that, put pressure on politicians to try to fix it. And we don't need to put pressure on you because you already got it and you're already in line with the thought process to get it fixed. So keep doing good stuff, sir.
Well, I appreciate what you guys do, Matt. I appreciate the service you provide to our community, training law enforcement, training new gun owners like my wife and my son. I trusted them to you for that kind of training,
Appreciate
and
that.
much appreciated.
Definitely. So how can people learn more about you, get involved, donate to your campaign, etc.? What's the best way for them to do that?
Well, you know what? Because I think this is important because Joe Biden is no longer running for president. I think it's okay to say, "Let's go, Brandon."
I love it.
Uh,
I love
but
it.
but it's not just "Let's go." It's actually "Let's vote
Yeah,
Brandon."
absolutely.
Dot com. Let's vote Brandon.com.
Yeah. Super.
Well, we
Okay.
appreciate your time coming on and sharing your insight. And I wish I had a few more guys like you in Pennsylvania. Uh,
You got
but
some good guys down there. There's some great members, GT Thompson, Dan User. There are some really terrific members of Congress down there.
yeah,
Really solid guys.
yeah,
Awesome.
I don't get to interact with them as much as the guys at the state level with the organizations that I'm involved with. But yeah, we definitely have some good folk representing us.
For sure.
Sure. Super. Everybody get out there and vote.
Yeah, and
Let's
if
go.
you and if you get out and vote and get somebody else to go out and vote
Yeah.
too, but do your best to help someone else get out there and vote for pro liberty.
Everybody's vote counts.
That's right.
Super. Have a great night, sir. Thank you.
Thank
You,
you.
sir.
Thanks, guys.
There's lots of sponsors to make this show possible, like Mantis.
Check them out and give them your business.
Meet the Pressers is brought to you by Mantis X. Mantis X helps shooters suck less. Next Level Training. Makers of CERT training products. Saber Red. Saber Red has been making men and women cry since 1975. Meet the Pressers is also brought to you by these fine companies, shows, and organizations. Thank you.
Thank you for watching Meet the Pressers.